This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
how
insane.
Did I do that?
You're insane.
Well, hello everybody. Happy Monday. I got to fly, not literally, but figuratively. I'm flying today with Ryan Campbell. I am so happy to be with you today. It's going to be a great show. Ryan is a great guy, and he has an unbelievable story. But he's going to be my guest on the show. But there's so much else to talk to you about. Quick hello to Joey Dumont. Hello, Joey. I've missed you. It's been a week. It's been a week without the two of us connected. But I'm sure I hope you'll be in the Zoom after show afterwards. So a few things to kind of kick us off. First of all, previous guests, because on CoronaTV, we're once you're part of the family and the community, you're with us for the long haul. And Greg Verdino's book, Never Normal. I mean, I knew that about him when I met him, to be honest with you. He was never normal. But his book came out yesterday or today. So go buy it. I'm actually going to just put that right now. And I just commented that should be going out to Periscope and Facebook and YouTube and a whole bunch of places. If you want to get his, it's essentially the best of Greg Verdino from the last 10 years or so. He truly is one of the smarter, maybe smartest people I know. And it's a series of essays. It's a quick read. And it's something that I think you will enjoy. So go check it out. All right. As I was mentioning, Ryan Campbell is going to be my guest today. He is a paraplegic plane crash survivor. He's an author. He's a keynote speaker. And he's got a little baby face. I wish I could tell you just like mine, but I'm not young anymore, but he is. And he's done probably more at the age of mid-20s. I don't know if I'm allowed to give out his age, as most people have ever done in a flippin' lifetime. So he is my guest today. But let's talk about a few other things quickly. Fat blogging, obviously I only did one live show last week. I was scared. I'm not going to get into the health and wellness conversation today because tomorrow I actually have Lee Oden, and Lee has also gone through a similar, a more substantial transformation. He's actually joining me for Corona cocktails tomorrow, but we're not going to be drinking alcohol. I think we're going to be drinking protein shakes or smoothies or something like that. And I'll talk about the psychologically, mentally, how nervous I was going on vacation and then coming back and worried about my weight. But it turns out over 2 weeks that I actually lost 0.1. So a lot of those fears, I wouldn't say they're unsubstantiated, but certainly the ability to get back into routine was tested. And as I said, I'll talk to you about that tomorrow, but I'm pleased to say that I've been able to, I'm 20 pounds down since the beginning of 2020. That is one 2020 that I do like. So today is National Massachusetts Day. And for all of my friends from Massachusetts, and there are many, it seems like Massachusetts is the official state of social media influencers and thought leaders. I just wanted to say, I hope you're having a good day today. As I mentioned, Lee will be my guest tomorrow, and it's a different kind of Corona cocktails. And then we have Tim, Piers, and Augie rounding out the week. And we're pretty much now fully booked through September. So, wow. I got to slow down on the guest bookings because, you don't want to, I think, book guests too far in advance. And as always, if you want to get my newsletter, it's delivered every Monday morning. You will get all of my seated soliloquies. You will get the scripts associated with these monologues and a little piece of my thought leadership. But most of the show, as you know, is focused on my guest. You will get my assessment of the highlights of each one of my previous guests and also a sneak preview of what to expect the following week. And all you have to do is text the word CoronaTV to 66866 or go to josephjaffe.com/subscribe. That actually is my speaker website, and I haven't done anything to it. I mean, maybe Ryan can give me some advice. I haven't even put the word virtual on my website. I've been too busy to do that, but that's on my speaker website. So a bunch of birthdays. We've had birthdays over Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Marlene Lyons on Saturday. I mean, there's so many. There's Norm Page. Scott Sorokin. I'm just looking and scanning the list. Today, Josh Golden, publisher at Ad Age, Jody Gordon, Cantor Ivor Joffe, and Mighty Mouse himself, Jonah Bombach. Happy birthday to you. And then, of course, on LinkedIn as well, a whole bunch of birthdays. Amadou, Joanna, Piotr, which I think is Peter, Lloyd, and so on and so forth. Hey, listen, it's time for the seated soliloquy. But before I do that, because I am a sadistic son of a bitch, I am going to play you a little birthday greeting because it never gets any older. Ladies and gentlemen, star of American Idol, the first American Idol, William Hung.
Hi, CoronaTV. This is William Hung from American Idol. I want to wish you a happy birthday, and here's a special gift for you. She bangs, oh baby, when she moves, I go crazy cause she loves like a flower, but she stings like a bee. Like every girl in history, you bang.
That's right, guys, you bang. And speaking of bangs, it's time for the seated soliloquy. So, of course, you'll meet Ryan, you'll find out his story, and made me think about this idea of what happens when disaster strikes. Is it a sign to do a 180 and run away from the fear and pain, or double down on the risk or perceived risk and run towards it? When I was 13, I was hit by a train, an express train. The suction of a whooshing train pulled me into what I suspect was a door handle and knocked me back onto the platform. I remember feeling the immense power of the knock, but no pain. As I opened my eyes, I was greeted with a hand and fingers that were either bruised or broken and dripping with blood. The gash on my head right here miraculously fell between my temple and my eye. And from what I was told, less than a millimeter away from my optical nerve. With all of that buildup, I still ride the New York City subway. In all seriousness, to this day, I try and hang back a few paces from the front of the platform. I don't like speed or being a daredevil. I have no desire to swim with the sharks, lest I end up sleeping with the fishes. There'll be no bungee jumping for me anytime soon. But the one exception for some ridiculous reason is skydiving or paragliding. That's still on my bucket list. We were all meant to fly, right? We all want to be birds. Our human instinct, or maybe it's Pavlovian, is to avoid making the same mistake twice, right? Fool me twice, shame on me. But at the same time, perhaps it's our brains being fooled or fooling us into avoiding the kinds of experiences which can truly make us and keep us alive, not dead, alive. Lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, and this is primarily because Chuck Norris is looking for it. When faced with varying degrees or moments of adversity, setback, or disaster, we need to figure out how to get back on that proverbial horse. And if it makes sense, take another crack at it. And as for the New York City subway, everyone knows what riders really have to fear: the giant-sized rats. Well, now it's time to bring on my guest. And I think instead of giving you an introduction, I'm rather just going to play you this.
We love storytelling, sharing moments from not only becoming the youngest person to fly solo around the world, but a horrific plane crash that changed my life forever. It took 2 years of planning, training and fundraising, over $250,000 on a laptop computer to be ready to even attempt the record. 24,000 nautical miles, 35 destinations, 15 countries. It was safe to say that life was pretty good. On December 28th, 2015, that all changed. An engine failure on takeoff in a vintage biplane. A horrendous plane wreck. I was airlifted to hospital as the only survivor. Shattered from head to toe, 5 breaks in my back, no feeling or movement from the waist down, and diagnosed a complete paraplegic. At age 21, I'd been given an unbelievable opportunity to compare the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, a journey of discovering where we truly learn. 6 months in hospital, a year and a half in rehabilitation, and an unbelievably long journey back to not only walking, but flying.
You know, Ryan, first of all, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
You know, I'm watching the video, and my sense is I don't think it gets old. And I think I almost see you like looking at it as if you're watching it for the first time, the highs and the lows. That was just my take of watching you.
That was sneaky. You caught me out there. I really was into that. I haven't watched it in a month or so, and it's wild. I was actually thinking when the camera switched to me that, you know, this is my life, and we put so much effort into creating that video, and now, you know, to see it being used and shared with the world, and to know that all that effort pays off when the story is shared. As it's just incredible. It's wild. It's a little bit hard, a bit like 2020 in general, to process all of this as it happens. So it's a bit of a journey.
And your journey is a journey of highs and lows, and they're both equally compelling to me. And I'd rather, you know, with you, the lows are in fact highs. And what I mean by that is, we met. We were at an event together, and in prepping for this, I was thinking to myself, paraplegic. I didn't see anybody in a wheelchair. You're walking again. So even the low has proven to be the most incredible high. And certainly, you know, I don't have to say this to you, how people just take the basic things like just their legs and walking for granted.
100%. And for me, it was an opportunity, I think, more than a high. It was to be 21 and to have experienced something so incredibly beyond anything I ever imagined being a normal Aussie kid. I always say I'm any more laid back, I'd be lying down. I'm just a casual Aussie guy. And to have experienced meeting the Royals, to have experience what it was like to be named one of Australia's 50 greatest explorers, or write and publish a book, or do all this stuff by 21, that was unique for a normal Aussie kid. But to then find myself as the only survivor of a plane wreck, a paraplegic in hospital, having a wheelchair custom fitted to my body, that was a backbreaking low. Both of those things together, however, were an opportunity to compare highs and lows, but to also do that at a young age, to kind of look back and say, well, where do I learn? Where do we grow? Where do we pull the tools and the mindsets, the tips and the tricks to be better at life? And I worked it out. You know, we pull those moments from the adversity, from the tough times in life. And that has led to everything I now do as a speaker.
I want to ask you this follow-up question. I want to go backwards to the beginning, but before I do, and I don't want to lose this question, and I'm trying to articulate it the right way. There really are two questions, but one is, how much of this resolution, this grit, this resilience to come back, to bounce back, to fight back, how much of that is you, the person? And if so, how special are you or unique are you? Are you in fact that special, that incredible, that talented? Because you don't strike me as an arrogant guy. So how does it, like, the question is it, how much of it is in your DNA, your personality, versus just in all of us to be able to do the same?
Joseph, it's in every single person, and this is what blows me away. You know, life is won and lost above the shoulders. I'm just a normal Aussie kid. My dad was a milkman. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. You know, we didn't grow up with heaps of money. We didn't grow up poor either. We were just kind of standard middle class, you know, grew up on a beach, you know, in Australia. Life is won and lost above the shoulders in my mind. And if I could say that learning to walk again was in fact a mental challenge, not a physical challenge, that really proves that point. And when we look at life, you know, there's no golden nugget just to get through life with ease. And I know, you know, we all wish we could have it. If I knew that golden nugget, I wouldn't be here with you, Joseph. I'd be on my yacht, you know, sipping my margarita in the island somewhere. There is no golden nugget. What we have to do instead is better ourselves every day, build our own mindset toolbox, pick up tools, learn from others, grow. Like, we live in a world where everything is so accessible. It's all at our fingertips. I am not extraordinary in any way, shape, or form. I'm quite the opposite. I just thrive on bettering myself, becoming tougher, more resilient, and building my mindset toolbox.
Okay, so humility is definitely present. But you also there's a third scenario, right? There's the yacht. I mean, this is much better than being on a yacht, sipping a margarita, being with me. I know that. You don't even have to say that. That's fine. But there's also a third scenario, right? The third scenario is the accident doesn't happen, and you do what? What would your life have looked like had this accident not happened?
When I wrote the end of Born to Fly, the book that I published when I was 20, I wrote the book itself as a recount day-to-day of the round-the-world flights, 70 days, 24,000 nautical miles, 180 hours in the air. It was my way to share the story with those who assisted me on the round-the-world flight. But when I got to the end of the book, I had to write an epilogue, and it was my way to sum up all of my feelings that went beyond just recalling a story. On this day we took off, we flew here, we did this is how big the thunderstorm was, this is how, you know, what the challenges were. The epilogue was my opportunity to pour my true emotions, you know, into a last kind of final few pages. What I spoke about was I had done what I could in my life up till that point to choose the right path. You know, that's all life is we just have all these chances to choose the right path. What's the right path? What's the wrong path? I wrote in that epilogue that I hoped the pathway I chose going forward was the right one. I wanted to be an airline pilot. I wanted to fly for Qantas in Australia. That's been my dream since I was 6 years old. And based off a speaking gig after the round the world flight, I was offered a job with Qantas. When I sat and I actually looked at it at age 20, I said no, and I turned it down. I then went to fly old airplanes, and I can show you. This is the aircraft I had the accident in, a very, very similar aircraft, a 1930s biplane. My dream at 20 was to fly warbirds, to fly old World War II airplanes. And I wasn't going to get to that point through joining an airline. So my pathway that I chose was to go and join a business as a pilot flying these vintage aircraft. That aircraft was the airplane that we had the engine failure in. It was the airplane that led to the accident, to a spinal cord injury, to an existence for the rest of my life that is completely different to what it would have been if I just took the airline job. But I do not regret any decision that I've ever made. I always have chosen, and I know this in my heart, the right path in that moment. We can't use hindsight. We can't look back. You know, life may have been different. I may be an airline pilot. I may be married with 3 kids, living in Australia, you know, driving to work and just living my life. But I chose the right thing at the time. The fact that that led to something that was hard, to say the least, you know, was out of my control. What I did with that afterwards was in my control. And, you know, I did everything I could to bounce back from that, find a new normal, find a new purpose, a passion. And I think I am doing more good now with my life than what I would have done if I was an airline pilot. So life is very different. Would I swap it out with the other option? No, I wouldn't.
Most times that you talk to someone who has overcome adversity and gone through sometimes even tragic moments, they all seem to say the same thing, which is that they wouldn't, you know, if they could go back and have an opportunity to do something different or for it to end differently, they say, this is my life right now. This is this has made me into who I am. And it's incredible to see people embrace it. And I think the insight there, Ryan, is that you can't have good without bad, right? I mean, I know it's cliched, right? You can't have a rainbow without rain, but there it is.
And you don't know what good is unless you experience bad. You have to have perspective, and you have to have some form of contrast. You know, if all you do every day is fly around in your private jet and eat fabulous food and live that life of, you know, say wealth, that's fantastic. But it's living a day in the shoes of someone living in poverty that gives you perspective on how good you have it. Otherwise, as humans, we adapt to our surroundings. Everything normalizes so quickly and so easily. And we're not content. We lose happiness in what we're doing. I was living a great life. Being in the accident showed me, I remember the first day walking with a walking frame through a door. And I'd been in the wheelchair for so long. And I remember being so tall, I felt like a giant, and thinking, wow, how close the top of that door is to my head. You know, I remember all these little drinks or, you know, foods when I was first in hospital that I would just crave like nothing else. I wanted them so badly. When something is taken away, just like our ability to travel to our home countries right now, we want it more than ever. But those challenges are what give us contrast and perspective as to all the good things we have in life. And we have to be the glass half full when we look, you know, with perspective through that lens at the world around us, as opposed to being, you know, a pessimist about it.
And those Qantas airline pilots are not flying at the moment. So you you know, who knew? So yeah. I want to quickly go to a few comments. Bob Farnham, one of our show regulars, said he's been looking forward to this episode. He's been flying. I didn't know this about Bob. He's been flying since he was 14 years old, which you know, which is still 7 years older than Ryan was when he went around the world, because that's what a spring chicken you are, my friend. Mark Masters, who was on the show Friday before, is going to join us for the after show. I love it actually when previous guests, because as I said, it's a family here, come back. And Henk Kampfer, one of my favorite guests, he said that, Ryan, you could be a Safa. Tell an Aussie something is impossible and they're stubborn and they are too stubborn to listen. Ain't that the truth? Laid back and stubborn at the same time. So there you go.
I will say to Hank, my nan says that I'm stubborn and my pa says that I'm determined. And I always, every time my girlfriend says that I'm stubborn, I say, I'm not stubborn, I'm determined. So absolutely, it's the only way to be.
And Yinka Charles said, building a mindset toolbox, awesome insight. I celebrate with you. And certainly we'll talk about some of these learnings and skills that you've now transformed and almost alchemy style created workshops and tools, etc. So we'll get there. I want to, I want to go back for a second to the the grand old age of 19, and you decide to because, as I said, the highs for me, the highs with you are almost as intriguing as the lows. To set the stage for flying, this is the part where I will now try and stump my guest with a quote, which I always say, I think you might get this. Sometimes flying feels too godlike to be attained by man. Sometimes the world from above seems too beautiful, too wonderful, too distinct for human eyes to see. Do you know who said that?
I do not. I've actually never heard that quote, but I really like it. I really do.
It's a good one. It's actually quite relevant. It's Charles Lindbergh.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I'll say some information. Charles was born in 1902 and he died. I didn't realize so recently. It's actually not that recent, but that's how old I am. In 1974. He was an American aviator, which we all know, but he was also an inventor and an activist. At the age of 25 in 1927, he went from obscurity as a U.S. airmail pilot, maybe could have delivered some of the ballots in the election in November, to world fame by, and most of you know this, making a non-stop flight from New York City to Paris. It was a 33.5-hour, 3,600-mile flight in a purpose-built single-engine Ryan monoplane called
the Spirit of St. Louis.
Of St. Louis. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So it appears this love for flying is, I don't know, it is a bug, and once you get bitten, there's no coming back from that. How did you fall in love with flying, and what godforsaken reason made you want to travel around the world at 19?
Flying is passion. It's passion driven. You speak to a pilot or anyone in the industry, and it is so passion driven. When I was 6 years old, my family and we all went on our very first overseas trip. So the first overseas trip for my mum and my dad, we climbed onto a Boeing 737 and we took off out of Sydney Airport in Australia, and we headed for an island in the Pacific. I was the youngest of three boys, and I always say the best looking. So I got to sit on the aisle, the window seat. I got to sit on the window seat. As we took off out of Sydney, it was just that moment of seeing the city from above, seeing the amount of buildings, how big the city was, the fact that all the roofs were red. I remember blowing me away at 6 years old. But it was climbing through the clouds. And that moment in a 6-year-old's head where I went, you know what? Airplanes can actually fly in the clouds. This just blew my mind. That ignited a passion for flying at a young age that never, ever went away. I believe it was in my blood, and this I do not understand, because at 6, despite, I didn't know this at the time, my granddad had passed away, and I did not have a lot to do with my uncle, but my uncle was a commercial pilot. My granddad had been a pilot when he was alive. My dad now flies. Both my brothers now fly. So I believe aviation is in our blood. It was that one flight that ignited it and allowed me to discover it. It held out all through school. Just like I think it was Bob, I learned to fly, started my lessons when I was 14 as well. In fact, I wanted to fly so badly, but common sense told me that I'd need quite a bit of money to learn to fly. So I thought I'd better wait till I get out of school and get a job. The other part said, well, I probably need a driver's license before I can fly an airplane, right? So I thought I'll at least have to wait till I'm 17. I read an article one day in the newspaper when I was 14 about a kid who flew an airplane on his own on his 15th birthday for the very first time. So to legally fly an airplane on your own in Australia, you can be 15. So I set a goal and I found an after-school job. I found a weekend job and I funded my own flying lessons. I would do a lesson every 2 weeks. I would save up $90 a week, $180, as I would say, every fortnight or bi-weekly in order to have a 1 hour flying lesson. And on my 15th birthday, much to my mum's despair, I climbed into an airplane and I took off and flew it around on my own. That did two things for me. It showed me what I could do with a little bit of kind of, determination and goal setting. But it also showed me that I really wanted to achieve everything I could at the youngest possible age. My heroes were Charles Lindbergh, or our version of Lindbergh, Charles Kingsford Smith. It was the pioneering aviators who were exploring, pushing the limits, doing things that had never been done before. I wanted to do everything I could at the youngest possible age. When I was 16, I could fly an airplane not only on my own, but I could actually take passengers within a certain radius from the airport. What that led to was a deal with my mates at school who were all 17 years old. I was 16. They could drive a car on their own. I still couldn't. So the deal was they had to drive me from school to the airport. I would take them flying, and then they had to drop me home afterwards. And again, 17.
Doesn't sound like a fair deal. I mean, it feels like they definitely got the better of the two, I would say.
They got a good deal. But at the same time, we just had the most fun sharing aviation amongst our friends. At 17, I had a private pilot's license. At 18, I had a commercial pilot's license. But I'd always wanted more. I've always been someone who, within me, and this is a good thing and a bad thing, I've always wanted more. I wanted to do something. I just wanted to get out there and do things that were fresh and new and push myself as a person. And that led to this idea of wanting to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. At 17 years old, I contacted one of Australia's most famous entrepreneurs, aviators, businessmen, and I asked him to help me with this idea of flying around the world. What was crazy about this is I hadn't asked another soul. In fact, no one else knew. My mum, my dad, my two brothers, my best friends, no one knew about this idea of wanting to fly around the world. All I had done was Google it. I printed off all the information on flying around the world. I'd hid it from my family in the third drawer down in my office desk. And I had read the articles. I contacted this entrepreneur. I'd found myself a mentor. I did this all under the radar. It was when I had to sit down with mum and dad and say, guess what I've done? What do you think about this idea of me flying around the world? That this all started to gain traction. It was from that point of my mum and dad, my poor mum and dad, accepting the challenge that we spent over 2 years fundraising $250,000 on a laptop computer, bringing together a team, training and preparing as a pilot, taking this unbelievably seriously. It was a wild 2 years just to get to the point where I could even attempt the round the world flight. It was so hard as a normal Aussie family doing that I think a lot of the story actually falls in that 2 years, not necessarily just the 70 days of flying.
I mean, I can't even imagine what that experience must feel like. At times, I mean, inclement weather and in such a small aircraft, it's not like being on that A380, your Qantas pilot kind of in cruise control or autopilot. The loneliness, the monotony, the ability to maintain focus. What was, maybe just share one or two unique moments, and I'm less concerned about the danger and I'm talking about spiritual connection moments, introspections, in that solitude.
I think, and while I do this, I'll play a clip and it'll give everyone a little bit of an idea of some of the footage from the round the world flight. But that 70 days and 24,000 nautical miles, one of the hardest parts was taking off from the Australian coastline, from exactly where you're looking at on the screen right now, a place called Wollongong. At 19 years old, after having spent 2 years telling people what I'm going to do, completely unaware if I have the ability to do it because I've never done it before. To take off and turn an aeroplane, a single engine aeroplane, out over the Pacific Ocean and just start was honestly gut-wrenching. And it put me into this state where it didn't matter what came up, I had to deal with it. I had to be agile enough. I had to have the ability to adapt and overcome and problem solve and stay calm when life got a little bit tough. And there were plenty of times on that round the world flight where that happened. We saw everything from 60,000 foot thunderstorms to icing on the aircraft over the North Atlantic to volcanoes with lava spewing into the water, glaciers, 9 hours of desert over Saudi Arabia. We saw, I descended over the Red Sea as I diverted around Iraqi airspace. We diverted away from Egypt as it was in a crisis at the time and landed in Jordan. We had air traffic control issues and 5 hours of hand pumping fuel into the aircraft in Indonesia. We had all sorts of ups and downs. We had the easy times too, flying across America, wondering what restaurant I was going to land at next, just living the dream. Beautiful sunrises.
KFC is my guess, right? If I know you.
KFC was in Jordan. I will tell you that. I paid. That's a whole nother story, but it was a phenomenal experience to do something like that, but doing it alone made it very surreal. So right here, we're over the top of Greenland. We're on our way to Iceland. I'm on my own talking to a GoPro because 60 Minutes told me I had to. But it's so hard to not share that with somebody else. But at the end of the day, that in order to succeed on an adventure such as around the world flight, you just have to keep moving. This wasn't an around the world flight. This was 35 separate A to B legs that happened to connect the dots from A to A and happened to take me around the world.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to build a case, which is aliens, suck you out of the cockpit because you're already high, and they start to dissect you to understand what makes you tick. And I may get there later, but I'm thinking to myself, there are so many people in this world. I started CoronaTV with a view of trying to help people that were stuck at home, literally, and stuck in general. How does the average person, and that is probably almost a trap to say the average person, but how does anybody achieve their version of what you did without having to do something as insane as fly around the world, taking off, saying, oh crap, what have I just signed up for? So how do you deliver this message of hope, this challenge to people to just do it and go find their equivalent, which is, let's be clear and let's be honest, going to be a lot more grounded and pragmatic than what you ended up doing?
You have to have a little bit of a sense of perspective again. You have to know the big picture, and you have to understand that life is short, and you have to look around you at the world and understand the fragile state of our day-to-day life. It could be over tomorrow, and we see that every day. It's all around us, stories of this. We have to grasp what we have as an opportunity. We have to look at the positives and say, for example, where we live, the country we grew up in, the opportunity we have at hand, the fact that, we have this these days. This is our ticket to everything. We can build a business in an hour. We can research any adventure. We can connect. We can learn. We can grow. And yet we send pictures to each other that expire in 10 seconds with bunny rabbit ears on. We have to get this. Just stop for a second. Get out of your daily bubble. Stop the grind. Step back and ask yourself why. Why are you here? What makes you happy? One of the things we talk about is, what's your pink Cadillac? And I know you'll bring this up at some point, but what's the one thing you do that's absolutely just makes you giggle like a 2-year-old kid? We get caught in this day-to-day life. Why are we here? For me, it's adventure. There it is. Oh, good God.
What are you talking about?
So here it is. When I moved to America, one of my dreams was to buy a pink Cadillac just like that. With, I wanted an Elvis Cadillac, and I went to Gracelands in Memphis and I bought a model Cadillac, and it sits by my TV. And then a few months later, one popped up for sale on the internet that happened to be pink, and it was affordable. So I bought it and I got it running properly and fixed it up. And now I own this 2.5-ton pink land yacht. It is the greatest thing I've ever bought in my life. It brings so many smiles and cheers and yells from everyone that car goes near. It has just made people so unbelievably happy. And it makes me so happy to be a part of that. So we come up with this saying, what's your pink Cadillac? Like, no one needs a pink car. That's not logical. What's the one thing you do for yourself that's not logical? It all boils back to that why. Like, why are we here? I'm here to love and laugh and smile and make a difference and make an impact. I'm here to explore. I'm here to do things day to day. And I'm not perfect by any means, but do things day to day that I know I'll be proud of when my time on Earth comes to an end. And it might seem all big picture and airy-fairy, but it's the truth. You know, I am proud of what I've done so far. I'm proud of the good times. I'm proud of the bad times. I'm proud of how I reacted. Everyone needs to ask themselves those questions. That's what leads you to dream and set goals. My dad always said you can do anything provided your head's screwed on right? If you want to fly your refrigerator to the moon next week, I just don't know whether you're going to really make that happen. But if you set a realistic goal, it could be like flying around the world. It could be a big goal. But if you set something that's realistic and you start to work through it with simple goal setting, you start to pull the right people together, you start to break it down and think about it, you will realize that the seemingly impossible is possible. The sooner you realize as a human that everyone who has achieved out there is simply a normal human, they're just like you, that opens up your mind to a world of possibility instead of, you know, constantly saying, I can't do that, I'm not them, you know, creating excuses. I don't have the money, I don't have the experience, I don't have the time. I will tell you a quick story based on that. When I wanted to fly around the world in the very beginning, I did not believe I could do it. And this is one of my 3 steps in my 3-step checklist. It's confidence. It's finding the 3-step checklist is gratitude, confidence, and resilience. And this is the story behind confidence. We have to have confidence in everything we do, in a goal that we want to achieve, or an adventure that we want to go on, or, you know, a course that we want to study, or whatever that may be. I wanted to fly around the world, yet I didn't think I could do it. And I was reading, and this is funny, Joseph, I was reading Charles Lindbergh's book, and I was sitting with a gentleman on the veranda or balcony of a hotel in Brisbane, Australia. He was an engineer. He was learning to fly. He had a couple of young kids, very intelligent man. And we started to talk about this book on Charles Lindbergh. And he said, isn't that cool? You know, like what he did. And I said, absolutely. I said, I'd love to do something like that. I'd love to push the limits and do something that's never been done before. He said, like what? And I said, fly around the world. I'd like to be the youngest person, first teenager in history to fly solo around the world. And he goes, well, why don't you? And I was almost taken back because I thought, you have no idea. Like, I don't know what it takes to fly around the world, but I know it's a whole lot harder than what you think it is. So I started to rattle off the reasons. I said, I don't have the money. I don't have the experience. I don't know how to do it. And he sat there and he listened. His name was Andrew. He sat there and listened to every single one of my reasons. And then he just smiled. And I think at that point he realized he was about to teach a 17-year-old kid a lesson. And he said to me, in order of, he took every excuse I'd given him, and he gave me not a solution, but the next step. When I said I couldn't afford to fly around the world, he didn't say, here's a blank check, go write yourself a $250,000 check and, you know, fund the round the world flight. If he did, it would never have happened. He told me about corporate sponsorship. He explained to me the basics of going to a company with a proposal of some form of, you know, adventure, presenting something to them where they can contribute and you can provide, say, publicity or exposure in return. He then looked at, you know, not having the experience. He explained the importance of finding a mentor, finding someone who had done something similar to what you had achieved or wanted to achieve, going to them, pitching your case, you know, pulling mentors on board onto your team, growing and learning from them and using them to help you achieve this wild idea of yours, right? By giving me the next step on every one of my excuses, Andrew he put the ball in my court. He removed every one of my excuses. He basically said, well, if you say you want to do this, if you actually want to do this, well, go get to work. And I did. And I went and I just started working. And that was the start of the 2-year process to make the dream happen. So I would encourage anyone out there who has their own, you know, big dream or, you know, undertaking that they, you know, want to tackle. And I would just encourage them to first off understand why they're doing it. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it for fame and all the Instagram likes and stuff. Understand why you're doing it. Find that core drive and then start to break it down. Pull on the right people. Understand that you are normal, but so is everyone else. And before you know it, you will have proven to yourself what you can do as a human by achieving that goal. And then once you've done that once, you know, it's unstoppable from there.
Dean Allen, also former guest on the show. And Dean, you're going to have to come back and tell us what wave of the pandemic we're in right now, because I'm I think maybe the only way to avoid this pandemic in the US, Ryan, is going to be to fly around the world and just. Is that social distancing? Anyway, but he said he's flying high listening to your story. Ryan, there were a couple of insights that I want to just touch on because I found them to be really, really profound from your end. But before I do that, have you ever been told, and I'm going to assume the answer is yes, so let's call this rhetorical, that you are wise beyond your years? Because it's almost like you're a time traveler. I'm thinking that you there are certain things like, what's your pink Cadillac? I'm like, that is keynote speaker, chronic global speaker 101, man. That is like, you are a pro. I mean, I loved it though. But you, I think. Have you been told that before? I don't want to say what I believe, but
yeah, 100%.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I have, but at the same time, I believe it's been my choices, in striving for the round the world flight at a young age that put me in a position to grow up quickly, and I either had to grow up quickly or fail, and I'm so thankful for that experience because that set the foundation for a spinal cord injury recovery and the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It set the foundation to have the right team around me, the right people, the right mindsets, and the right kind of, again, a foundation to build on as we moved forward. So yeah, I'm old.
Well, that was my gut. My gut was force of circumstance and adversity has shaped you and molded you, and it's almost this idea of like when you've gone out and you've had a couple of drinks too many and something terrible happens, you sober up, like that. And it feels like you grew up maybe even a little bit ahead of your time before you were meant to grow up. But I don't think it was a fait accompli that you would have taken the path. You could have also felt sorry for yourself and just degraded and unraveled.
Yes. And Joseph, the amount of people who did in the ward, I cannot tell you how many people did. And every single person, I watch quadriplegics with better mindsets, and I get so angry about it. I watch quadriplegics who couldn't do anything other than move their neck have better mindsets than someone who could walk, but they'd been like me, labeled a paraplegic. And there are things wrong with me, from internal systems to no calf muscles, no glute muscles. I stood in a campfire and got 3rd-degree burns, and I've had rocks eat into my feet because I can't feel the backs of my legs and my feet. Like, I have plenty of problems, but I'm so unbelievably lucky. But I'm lucky to know that and acknowledge that. I have seen people in the ward struggle, and it proved to me that this is mental. I don't care whether you're a 6-year-old kid who falls over and grazes your knee, or whether you are 55 and you just got told you have really severe cancer. Adversity is adversity. It is not a competition. We can use perspective to help, but at the end of the day, we're all having a rough day. 2020 is rough. It just is. And I don't want people to look at me and go, oh, he's wiser, beyond his years and he knows everything about everything. No, I don't. I struggle to make my bed in the morning. I literally, in the room next door, bed not made. If I don't get that done before my girlfriend gets home, I'm in trouble. Hearing what you said before, I've always struggled with my weight, and I'm so transparent about that. I love food, fried chicken. Like, I love food. Try move to America as someone who loves food. We all have our strong points and our weak points, and I encourage you to work on your weak points, but also harness and leverage your strong points. And my stubbornness is something that I've always leveraged. You could tell me when I was lifeless from the waist down that I'd never walk again, and I would tell you to go take a long walk off a short pier because I was going to get better. That did have repercussions when I finally realized about a year and a half in that I was actually plateauing off and I wasn't going to become the next Olympic sprinter. But, I was stubborn, and that helped me. Now, I mean, gosh, we could just dive into it. I just want people to understand that what you deal with, whether it be 2020, a pandemic, whatever it may be, you have to build your mindset toolbox, build up the tools, take the moments in your life that are so easily forgettable. And I have so many of them. I want to tell you about my sink or swim moment in a second. Take the little moments you have in your life, easily forgettable moments, convert them to tools, unpack them, Draw them out on a piece of paper. Try and write down every lesson you pulled from a moment with your grandma, a moment with a work colleague, a moment when you saw something happen, you saw a bad accident, you read a story on the news. Convert those moments to tools. Place them in the mindset toolbox. What you're doing, we all start with an empty toolbox when we're born. This concept got me through spinal ward. I come up with it in the middle of a night. I had to find clarity amongst the confusion in my head. This is how I did it. We're taking easily forgettable moments. We're placing them in an unforgettable drawer. And that's a drawer that we have access to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have learned so much throughout my life. Next time I have a bad day, I have a whole bunch of tools to draw from. We have to learn how to find tools, when to use them, when not to use them, and how to keep them sharp, keep using them. One of the last days that I was in hospital, and this goes for anyone who's having a challenge, I jumped in my wheelchair and I wheeled down away from the Sydney hospital. I wheeled down to a cafe and I pulled the chair away because I brought my own with me. And I wheeled under that table and a gentleman walked down to have lunch with me. He had an arm missing and a leg missing. His name was Paul de Gelder. If you don't follow him on socials, you need to. He was a Navy clearance diver in Australia. He was attacked by a shark, lost his arm, lost his leg. He was one of the fittest humans I'd ever seen in my life. And it just made me feel terrible that, that I had been able-bodied for so much of my life and still was so unfit. But he sat down with me and we talked. Now, I had ex-Australian Wallabies rugby union coaches come into the hospital and talk to me. I can't tell you how many people I had support me whilst I was in hospital, giving me tips and tricks, sitting down with me for hours. I have seen more psychologists than you know what to do with. When I sat down that day at that cafe, Paul de Gelder said 3 words to me that were more powerful than any session I ever had with a psychologist or psychiatrist. He said, sink or swim. And he didn't have to explain it because in that moment, I knew that at one point in his life, he actually had to swim. He was in the water and got attacked by a shark and he chose to swim. He said, sink or swim. And you know what sink is? It's a long, slippery slope to what leads to suicide. And I'm really blunt about it. It's a decline in mental health to the point where you just don't see an out. And I was put in a position in hospital where I could have probably gone either way. They were both pretty slippery slopes. If I had gone the other way, people would have sat back and went, he had a rough run. That I can see why. The truth is any adversity can send us down that slippery slope. We have to choose to sink or swim. And just like Paul, I chose to swim. And that means that you get up every day and you tackle the challenge at hand the best you can. You don't beat yourself up when you have off days, because I tell you what, this year we're all having a lot. I have a lot. We're all having a lot, but just make sure that we do the best we can. We have more good days and bad days, and remember that it's all above the shoulders, and, continue to build that toolbox.
I'm going to leave a lot of the thoughts that I wanted to share to the Zoom after show, and I can maybe share them with you and we can continue the conversation. What I do want to do before, in the time we have left, first of all, is a slight build, and I'll expand on that in the Zoom after show. I think to use your literal and figurative analogy of sink or swim, there's another word for swim is correct. But what you've, I think, shared with me is that the sink is not an instantaneous thing. It's a gradual decline. It's almost like if I was to say stay or swim, that's just as bad, because it's the treading. You use the analogy, the treading of water that eventually leads to the sink when you run out of steam, when you inactivity. Whereas swim represents the go for it. Get yourself away from where you are by any means necessary. So whether you sink or you stay, you may, the result or the outcome is almost the same. The only viable solution here is to swim. I agree. And that is my takeaway from you today. I want to give you the opportunity in the last few moments to just touch on what I think is a core positioning for you now and the company, which is you alluded to a 3-step checklist to navigating change. And I would love for you just to touch very, very briefly on those 3 steps. And then, of course, if people really want to find out about how to work with you, how to hire you, how to adopt or adapt these checklists or toolboxes, they can go to ryancampbell.co and find out more. So if you wouldn't mind, just tell us what those 3 steps are very briefly.
100%. The 3-step checklist to navigating change. It's my 3 favorite tools from my mindset toolbox. So I love to teach organizations to fill their mindset toolbox, to put as many of those moments of life into it. That turns us into more resilient humans. It creates great teams, great organizations. My 3 favorite tools, gratitude, confidence, and resilience, then form the 3-step checklist to navigating change. Simple as this. When a pilot flies an airplane, something goes wrong, a red light flashes, a warning buzzer sounds. Pilots don't, despite what Hollywood says, pilots don't just start pulling levers and pressing random buttons, right? There's a system. And that systematic approach to overcoming the emergency is through a checklist. Now, a pilot uses a checklist for a set of predetermined problems, and he works through it step by step, doesn't skip anything, make sure he checks them all off, and hopes that basically results in a resolve to the problem. I wanted to create a checklist, not for an airplane, but for daily life. It's just a checklist to not to solve your problems, because that checklist doesn't exist. It's a checklist to put you in a more change and challenge ready mindset. Whether you are an individual or organization, we want to put you in a more change and challenge ready mindset. 3 things: gratitude before we even start a problem, before we even start to climb the mountain, before we even start to work through whatever the adversity, the change, challenge, crisis is that you're up against. We have to find gratitude, find something to be thankful for. My moment early on was when I stared into a quadriplegic's eyes called Ben, realized that I was lucky to be a paraplegic. That's a very short version of that story. But before I even started down my recovery road, realized that I was lucky to have what I had. I had to focus on what I had left as opposed to what I'd lost. I found gratitude in my situation. And by doing that, finding gratitude allows us to shrink the mountain before we even start to climb it. Once we've found gratitude, some form of thankfulness in our situation, we must find confidence. That's the story with Andrew, the removal of excuses. How can we be confident in our ability to overcome the problem? We simply lock in the next step. We all want to know when, this whole virus is going to be over. We would all like to know when we could be, doing 30 or 40 gigs a year or whatever it is in your life that you want to get back to. We don't get to know that. We just have to focus on the next step, especially when learning to walk again. That was huge for me, but for everyone. Find confidence in your ability to overcome by locking in the next step. The last step, once we're confident, we're moving, we've got something to work towards, we have to be resilient. That comes back to this whole concept of there is no golden nugget to get us through life. Life's going to be tough. We've all experienced adversity. We will all experience more. It's a byproduct of breathing, right? So how do we find ourselves in a state that's resilient? How can we be tough? How can we be strong like those people we look up to? We do it by anticipating the need to adapt, right? Anticipating the need to adapt. You need to look forward at your journey from where you are to the resolution, solution, and goal. You need to look ahead. You need to first off acknowledge that there'll be tough times. There'll be obstacles. You're going to have to jump left or right around those obstacles. That's life. By looking forward and saying, okay, well, what might come my way? Risk mitigation, what might come my way? And thinking about potential ways to get around or over those obstacles. When they arrive at your doorstep, the shock factor is removed, right? We know they're coming. We've anticipated them. They're just simply now part of the process. Find gratitude in everything that you come up against. You have to, right? It shrinks the mountain. Find confidence by locking in the next step. Just get moving. As you say, just swim. Just find yourself a little bit, just every day, just one little bit further on to where you were yesterday, and then be resilient. Understand that this will be tough. There's no easy road. There's no golden ticket. Start looking ahead, anticipating you need to adapt. Build your mindset toolbox. Start to look at the ways you can overcome all the challenges that are in front of you, whether you like it or not. And those 3 things together, very quick, every day, easy way to find yourself in a more change and challenge ready mindset.
Well, I feel like I've started to sharpen my tools. I am certainly grateful for this opportunity to spend time with you, hear your unique story. And it's a story that hasn't concluded yet, right? Just the first quarter, exactly. As we would say in cricketing terms, there's a little asterisk next to your name, which means 26 not out. It's been a hell of a knock, a hell of an innings. I feel like you're just getting started. This was Ryan Campbell. You can follow him on the socials at Ryan Campbell Speaking. You can find out more about him, his virtual speaking, his campfire storytelling sessions at ryancampbell.co. Of course, if you want to read the story of this unbelievable solo effort around the world, the US release of Born to Fly is available wherever books are sold. And I've pasted the Amazon URL in the comments below. There is nothing more to say except to give you the last word. And then Ryan and I will be heading over to the Zoom after show. So Ryan, the sky, not the floor, the sky is yours for final word.
Look, I appreciate you having me on, and I can't wait to chat to everyone in the after show. But look, 2020 is tough, and there's a lot of stories out there, a lot of people, a lot of individuals that we can draw from, and we can be inspired by. And I think it's important right now to look out, make sure we're always delivering value and delivering content and helping the people around us. And I am definitely very approachable, and I think most people are. So if you want to connect with me, Ryan at ryancampbell.co, not .com. I can't afford the M yet, just Ryan at ryancampbell.co. I'd love to talk to you. It's a tough year, and right now, try use that checklist. Try build up your mindset toolbox. But more than anything, if you ignore everything that I've said, just understand that life, these tough times is won and lost above the shoulders. So jump on YouTube, go down to your local Barnes and Noble, start to better yourself a little bit, turn off TikTok, have a little bit of a investment in your mental health, your tools, tips and tricks that you can use to navigate change and challenge and crisis and adversity. And it'll lead to a whole life of adventure and wonderful things, but it'll also put you in a really resilient place so you can tackle all the challenges that inevitably come our way. So thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. And CoronaTV will return as Corona Cocktails, 5 p.m. tomorrow with Lee Odin, where we'll be drinking non-alcoholic protein shakes. See you guys later in the Zoom after show or tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.